Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good
Welcome.
morning.
Hi, Connie.
Hi.
Nice to see you. So we had a little bit of moment here, and I'm so excited to have you, Connie, and because you just met Alex Jack. He's on the back room here. We're going to bring him forward in a minute. But, you know, this idea of history is what I feel like the show is going to be about today, because Alex Jack and I go back about 32 years, and he's going to share a little bit more with us. But Connie, with our green show keeps growing, and I'm so excited.
Does.
You know, I'm so excited to have you. And you know, the journey here for me has been the last few shows for everybody. I hope you've been able to join us, but we've been on with so many different people. We started off with solar sprinklers, and Connie and I learned a lot with solar sprinklers, and the owner with solar sprinklers, Shane, is going to come on the show one of these moments. And but today we have an amazing guest. We have Alex Jack with us. And Connie, tell us a little bit, like the other day when I told you about the East West Journal, what did you remember?
Well, I used to buy that magazine, and I'm not sure when it was first published. I'm guessing it was the end of the 60s, the late 60s, maybe early 70s. I think it was the late 60s for me. But
yeah.
You know, the idea that you know, there were groups of people, clusters of people around that were you know, really encouraging consciousness, you know, in all ways. Consciousness of, you know, how we relate to ourselves and the earth, consciousness with each other, consciousness, finding out about ourselves. Many of us did, you know, some intense journeys, whether they were hallucinogenic or other, you know, journeys. But, you know, there were clusters of people that were, you know, beginning to become more conscious. Macrobiotics, of course, was one of the forerunners of that. And I don't pretend to know, you know, a lot. I don't have a lot of knowledge about it. I've had some firsthand experience on how energy works in my body and how it doesn't work well, you know, how I get blockages. And I'm sure, you know, that we'll learn a lot more today from Alex Jack. I'm really excited to hear him firsthand. I have watched some YouTube information, you know, a class that he was giving on cosmology, and very interesting to me. All of it, you know, is related. And we have, you know, we've had Marcia Chung, the feng shui specialist, on. Mm-hmm. We've had Penny Norkett with tapping and essential oils. As you talked about, we've had the solar energy people, solar panels, solar sprinklers, and Marsha Prohofsky with macrobiotics, the last two shows, which have been delightful and very informative on how we can nourish our bodies and create at the same time, be the creative beings that we are. So we just keep growing. This show keeps growing and expanding as our, you know, humanity does, and our consciousness hopefully does, that, you know, our relationship to the earth and the need for renewable energy and sustainable products, you know, keeps growing. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Connie's an energetic healer. She's a color consultant. She does her own feng shui called Vost. And I have been working with macrobiotics for about 32 years. I'm a theologian. I just graduated with my second master's, and I've been working in the field of, you know, spirituality and where we're going on the planet as far as a humanity. And so I run the organization Torch, the Organization for Realizing Change in Humanity. And I'm thrilled to have my good friend Alex Jack. We've been connected, and I'm going to bring him on the screen, and then we'll share a little bit, and we'll let him have the full screen. So let's go ahead and welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Connie. I'm delighted to be here. I'm actually on the other side of the continent, from sea to shining sea. I'm in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, about halfway between New York City and Boston. And it's a beautiful summer day here. And anyway, I'm delighted to be with you and your listeners or your viewers from around the world. As Lynn said, my own background is as a macrobiotic teacher and dietary counselor. I've also written some books and traveled widely. And this morning, this afternoon, I'd like to share with you some of my my thoughts and comments on the corona epidemic that we're all experiencing. I'm not sure that it'll be a macrobiotic perspective, but it'll be definitely a holistic perspective.
Thank you.
And I have prepared a slideshow. So
fantastic. Fantastic. So what I would love to talk just a couple minutes before you bring your slideshow on, you know, we go back to One Peaceful World magazine. And I want you to just share a little bit about the East West Journal, because Connie remembered it. And I think it's really at the forefront of the organic food movement. I was looking at statistics last night in the organic food movement. And in 2019, I think there were 9.1% of the American people that don't eat organic, and the rest of us all eat organic. So that was huge statistics for me to look at and share. And I'm just seeing a huge wave of organic, you know, people becoming interested. And as you know, I've been working in Pakistan, starting the natural food movement. So we'll have a lot of friends. We already have a couple of friends from Pakistan. We have our peace promoter, Haji Khan Faroch. We have Raymat, which I built and supported him to build the first sustainable school in Pakistan. So anyway, tell a little bit just about the East West Journal and One Peaceful World. I worked for you for a very short time, but I totally gave you a tribute last night. I don't know if you saw it, but I
didn't see it, but anyway, yeah, East West Journal, as both of you mentioned, was kind of the leading countercultural magazine of the 70s and early 80s. And it was centered in Boston. It was part of the wider macrobiotic community natural foods movement. In fact, we shared headquarters with Erewhon Trading Company, which was the pioneer natural foods company. It was the first company to actually use the term natural foods. And it was a large warehouse. And one of the things I remember most about working there was that at lunchtime, we were on the second floor. We would actually all go out and climb the fire escape and go up 3 or 4 stories to the top floor, which was the top of the Erewhon warehouse, where they had a hot lunch that somebody prepared for everybody. So there were about 100 people. And our little group from the magazine, maybe about 15 people, would go up those fire escapes. And anyway, that's one of my enduring memories of that period in the mid-70s.
That's fantastic. That's great. I have lunch with Joel Woolner quite often, and we just shared lunch yesterday, and I'm trying to get him moving into coming public with me. But, you know, Joel goes back to Erewhon as well. But, you know, how long did East West Journal really stay in the forefront of the movement?
Well, I was at the Journal for 7 years and you know, went up. By the end, I was editor-in-chief, and then I left to work with the Kushis directly, writing books. And the magazine continued for a few years, and then it was taken over by some larger holistic company that changed its name to Natural Health. So, but it had a nice lifetime, and I guess an afterlife as well.
What about One Peaceful World? You went in,
well,
when did you?
Then with the Kushis, our activities moved out here to the Berkshires. Then we started a little society called One Peaceful World Society, and then I edited the newsletter for about 20 years, and then actually that morphed or evolved into Amber Waves, which was a project that we started in the year 2000. In fact, it was right in your backyard, so to speak. I went out to the Sacramento Valley with some friends, and we organized the farmers against the first GMO rice that was about to be released by Monsanto. And everybody told us it was a done deal, but we got the farmers together and we went to see the Rice Commission in Sacramento, and we started nationwide petitions. Anyway, the end result was it killed GMO rice in California. It was never released, and so Monsanto went down to defeat. So anyway, great victory.
That is amazing story. That's a fantastic story. So let's let you move into your presentation. Connie and I will be in the back office. Connie, any questions before we go out?
No, I just wanted to correct myself. You know, I lived in Rhode Island in the early 70s, and I'm sure that's where I was introduced to the East-West Journal. My memory is like, well, some missing spots there, but yeah. So I was out there in the East Coast with you guys.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm
for
sure
a number of years. Yeah.
Yeah, we probably interacted at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to leave you to the full screen. We appreciate it, but we can hear everything you say. If you need anything in the private chat, why don't I help you get your screen up first? If you want to get the screen, do you want to do the screen first?
Yeah, let me get into the.
Okay, I'll stay on the screen. Connie and I will stay on till the screen is up, and then we'll hop off and let you run the show here. But, Alex is, I did some marketing with Alex, and he's just been such a forefront runner. I did a tribute to him last night because when you look at the organic food movement and the prolific writing, he said he wrote a few books. He's a prolific writer. This is not to be taken lightly. And one of the big stories I shared was my 3 boxes going to Japan. And you have to have the right screen. So pull it back off, and then you're going to look for your screen. So pull it back off. There you go. And you're going to make sure and press on your screen share. You need the right box. There you go. So anyway, these 3 boxes of books Alex gave me to go to Japan from One Peaceful World. And I went down to the city, and I was staying at Joshua Rosenthal's. There it is, Alex. You've got it up now. I was staying at his house that night and flying out early the next morning. So I stopped by the center in New York, and I came back out, and my whole car had been broken into, and all the boxes disappeared. And Alex said, well, I guess New York City needed the books better than Japan. And it was so painful to me because, I had this big mission with these 3 big boxes of, One Peaceful World books that Alex had written, and Michio. And anyway, that's one of my little stories, but I have many. But okay, we're going to let you lead the show. Thank you so much. And
okay, thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Connie. All right, so let's begin the show for this morning. It's entitled "The Anatomy of a Pandemic." Okay, there will be one more new viral epidemic before the spiral of history peaks in about 20 years, educator Michio Kushi predicted in late 2014. And it will spread worldwide, he continued. I was the executive director of the Kushi Institute at that time, and along with a colleague had gone into Boston to see him about guidelines for the Ebola crisis that had just broken out and was threatening to spread beyond West Africa. Michio offered sound dietary advice based on his seminar on AIDS and diet that he gave in the Republic of the Congo for the World Health Organization in the mid-1980s. But he warned Ebola would not be the last viral outbreak. He said, quote, world leaders will come to you. And I think by that, he meant that a balanced yin-yang dietary approach offered the most effective remedy. It may have been Michio's last prediction as he passed away a few months later. Following those guidelines, we actually did set up a dedicated website called Ebola and Diet, which is still up, in which we offered the first dietary guidelines for Ebola, tailored to the Central and West African traditional way of eating, including home remedies. And it was very well received. We got a special commendation from, I think it was Delta Airlines, because they were the only airline at that time that had flights regularly scheduled between West Africa and the United States and Europe. And they were very concerned for the safety of their passengers, their pilots, and their crew. And they said that our guidelines helped to put them a little bit at ease. So that was the Ebola crisis. This spring, as the Corona crisis began, I was invited to teach at the Kushi Institute of Europe for several weeks. In addition to classes on healthcare and diagnosis, I gave a public lecture on the crisis, focusing on the probable origin of the virus as a result of unsustainable agricultural practices. But as Amsterdam gradually shut down, my talk had to be moved online. And after the United States government warned Americans abroad to come home immediately or face being stranded, I rescheduled my remaining classes and moved up my return flight. The day I left, at the end of March, the Kushi Institute classrooms and restaurant were closed down. Natural foods and takeout meals were still allowed to be sold at Deishima, the school's well-stocked store, conveniently located across the street from the Rijksmuseum. I love to visit the National Museum and practice my visual diagnosis skills on the Rembrandts, Vermeers, and other masterpieces. But like the nearby Van Gogh Museum, it was one of the first casualties of the epidemic. It barred its doors to visitors before the schools and churches closed, a telling commentary on what the Dutch hold sacred. The Kuan Yin Temple, meanwhile, one of the most peaceful places in the city, closed down even before I arrived. The Bodhisattva of compassion, it appeared, had a heavy schedule in the days and months ahead. The corona pandemic gave rise to a multitude of theories about its origin and cause. The most persistent conspiracy theory, and the one promoted by the White House and State Department, is that the virus originated in a Chinese laboratory. It turned out that many of the original victims of the outbreak had not visited the animal wet markets in Wuhan or come into contact with anyone who did. 2 laboratories in Wuhan were engaged in research on bat viruses associated with SARS, a deadly corona-like disease that broke out in 2003. One of the Chinese labs was engaged in biowar research, and there was collaboration with American researchers. Investigative journalists turned up troubling evidence of what was called gain-of-function experiments involving the manipulation of deadly viruses by both superpowers, both the United States and China. Because of an international agreement banning biowar research, the tests were classified as biodefensive, or designed to counter new enemy bioweapons rather than manufacturing new biooffensive plagues. This linguistic sleight of hand not only flouted the treaty, but it also made pathogens more deadly, transmissible, and in some cases, newly airborne. Still, as most outside experts in global health agencies concluded, there is no evidence that the virus emerged from the labs. The Trump administration's determination to demonize China harkened back to the search for weapons of mass destruction that served as the pretext for the war in Iraq. As soon as COVID-19 surfaced, I intuitively felt that it arose from monoculture and other modern agricultural practices. So it was irrelevant whether it first surfaced in a market or laboratory. Ebola, another mysterious viral disease, emerged in Africa and was also carried by bats. In that case, the bats ate fruit, and the virus was traced to tainted bananas. In the wake of colonialism and industrialization, monoculture and commodity crops have spread worldwide. And in Uganda, site of Marburg, another Ebola-like viral disease, banana consumption is the highest in the world. In South America, Argentine hemorrhagic fever, very similar to Ebola, emerged. Medical researchers traced it to pesticides that upset the delicate ecosystem of natural checks and balances in the maize fields. The end result was the emergence of a novel virus transmitted by a small rodent dubbed the maize mouse. In Malaysia, Nipah viral disease broke out about 20 years ago following the rapid clear-cutting of the forest to make way for palm oil plantations. The deforestation drove fruit bats to trees on the edge of a hog farm. The pigs got infected from bat droppings and urine and started the epidemic, which was the basis for the film Contagion. Similar new viral conditions have emerged in many countries ravaged by modern agriculture, deforestation, and urbanization. But for the most part, these outbreaks have remained localized and little known. In China, the virus emerged in Wuhan, as you can see on the map, a large industrial city on the Yangtze River in central China. It was originally, as I said, thought that it originated in the wet market, but that has now been shown to be in error. The animals associated with the virus are, number one, the pangolin on the lower left, which is a small, scaly anteater. But in the last several months, bats, in the pictured upper right, have quickly moved into the top of the suspect list. Known as horseshoe bats, the animals come from Yan'an, a province 2,000 kilometers southwest of Wuhan. I'm going to go back to that slide of China and I'll show you where Wuhan or Yunnan. Yunnan is in that brown shaded province in the middle lower part of the map. You can see it's about 2 inches on the slide, but it's about 2,000 kilometers actually in distance. So it's a really long way from where the actual first people experienced symptoms. All right, horseshoe bats in Yunnan and other parts of China, are pictured here on the right, are insect-eating bats, very much unlike the fruit bats in Africa pictured on the left, which have been linked to Ebola. The insect-eating bats are carnivorous, and we classify them as more young or contracted, while the fruit-eating bats are more ean, or more expanded. Corona emerged in a temperate zone where the plants, the animals, and the people are also more young, smaller, more compact, and drier. Ebola emerged in a tropical climate where the flora and fauna are more yin, large, expanded, and moist. Corona thrives in cooler weather, Ebola in warmer weather. Corona creates, among its many symptoms, blood clots, which are hardened, young, contracted symptoms, whereas Ebola leads to hemorrhaging, expanded yin symptoms. So as we can see, these are two complementary opposite viral diseases. In the case of Ebola, the most likely scenario is that chemicals sprayed on the soil created havoc in the microbiota. And the microbiota means the diversity of bacteria, viruses, fungi, arthropods, and other microbes and life forms that live in the soil. So we think they gave rise to mutation in the soil, and then the virus contaminated the bananas and the other fruit. The fruit bats ate the bananas and incubated the virus in their digestive systems. The bats are not carriers and do not themselves get sick. But as small, compact, warm-blooded mammals with high metabolism from flying, the bats augment or pressure cook the virus as it passes through them. Then their saliva, urine, and feces fall to earth and infect chimpanzees, gorillas, and other monkeys. The monkeys are a valuable food source of bush meat, as it's called, in war-torn, conflict, mineral devastated Africa. By the time the people who eat monkey meat get the virus, it has increased in virulence by passing through 2 mammals. Relatives or medical personnel who then come into contact with their bodily fluids often get infected too, and the contagion spreads like wildfire because now it has passed through 3 mammals, each one magnifying its effects. A compounding factor may be that the bats' nocturnal lifestyle. After hunting at night, they sleep during the day in caves, and their body temperature drops precipitously as they enter a state of hibernation. The bat's internal thermostat appears to be supercharged by this phenomenon. Note too the lack of social distancing among the bats, so that their close quarters creates more heat and makes the virus more virulent. In the case of corona, chemicals sprayed on crops in Yunnan, a major hub for rice, soybeans, rapeseed, cotton, and tea, appear to have given rise to a novel viral strain. In addition to fertilizer, chemical pesticides are used on the crops to prevent insect infestation. In 2019, just months before COVID appeared, Yunnan was devastated with an invasion of insects known as armyworm, locally known as heart-devouring worm, and pesticide use soared. Since insects and spiders are the main food of horseshoe bats, they are at high risk for contamination and probably picked up the toxin from eating these tiny insects exposed to the sprays or nibbled on contaminated crops. This also explains why pangolins are carriers. What do the horseshoe bats and the pangolins have in common? They're both insect eaters. Pangolins, as I mentioned, are small ant eaters. They eat ants, termites, and other ground insects. So they are also directly or indirectly affected by insecticides and other sprays. Journalist Abraham Lustgarten recently reported, quote, "Yunnan is undergoing enormous change. Quaint subsistent farm plots have been overtaken by hastily erected apartment towers and high-speed rail lines as the province endures dizzying development fueled by decades of Chinese economic expansion. With every new felled tree, the bats' habitat shrank, putting the viruses they carry on a collision course with humanity." Overall, pesticide use in China has skyrocketed from less than 1 million metric tons in 2004 to 3.7 million tons in 2014. Pesticide use per hectare in China is about 1.5 to 4 times the world average. Glyphosate is widely used on corn, rice, soybeans, and other crops in China. The herbicide has been linked to cancer, and in the United States is now the subject of class action lawsuits against Monsanto. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, researchers just published a study in the journal Nature suggesting that the coronavirus can be transmitted by the bats to the human digestive system as well as the respiratory system. As with fruit-eating bats in Africa, Chinese insect-eating bats are carriers and do not symptomatize, but they are trapped and eaten in China, hence the wet markets. And they are also the subjects of medical and military research, hence the laboratories. Bat droppings may have also been picked up by the pangolin and other mammals, further concentrating the virus. For the most part, COVID-19 appears to have passed through only one or at most two mammals, rather than three as in Africa. Compared to the ordinary flu, it is about 10 times more deadly, but compared to Ebola, it is 10 times weaker, a logarithmic progression proportional to the number of mammals through which it has passed. In a just published article on bats and the coronavirus, the journal Scientific American reports, quote, the emergence of new pathogens tends to happen in places where a dense population has been changing the landscape by building roads and mines, cutting down forests, and intensifying agriculture. A related theory to the origin of corona is that respiratory susceptibility to the viral outbreak originated with glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, Monsanto's weed killer. According to Stephanie Senoff, PhD, a scientist at MIT here in the Boston area, biofuels made from corn, wheat, and other crops sprayed with Roundup are now used so widely by the transportation sector that aerolized glyphosate from exhaust fumes are everywhere. Not only cars, trucks, and buses, but also planes and ships now use a mixture of conventional fuels and biodiesel containing glyphosate. Recall how coronavirus initially spread among passengers on airplanes and cruise ships exposed to such emissions. In China, she points out, the Yangtze River runs through Wuhan and is highly polluted with industrial waste, as well as pesticide runoff containing glyphosate. Other hotspots initially for COVID included New York and New Orleans, that both border polluted rivers, the Hudson and Mississippi, and have large biodiesel fleets of buses and rapid transport systems. Meanwhile, much of Europe's biodiesel originates from GMO Roundup Ready soybeans grown in Argentina. E-cigarettes also include aerosolized biodiesel additives, Stephanie reports, and the recent epidemic of a new vaping disease that affects the respiratory system of users, particularly adolescents and children, presents many of the same symptoms as corona. She concludes, quote, I strongly suspect that the degree to which a person is susceptible to COVID is proportional to the degree to which they have been exposed to glyphosate. Eating a certified organic diet and staying away from major highways may be among the best tools for protection from an acute reaction to COVID-19. Another major theory of COVID-19's origin is that it is linked to the rollout of 5G wireless networks in Wuhan, Seattle, and other initial hubs of contagion. A little research shows that 5G did appear shortly before the pandemic, but it was also introduced in dozens of other Chinese cities beside Wuhan at the same time, and no outbreaks occurred. Still, 5G, as well as 4G, 3G, and other earlier incarnations may be a significant factor. In his new book, The Invisible Rainbow, the first comprehensive investigation of the health effects of electricity, from the introduction of the telegraph to today's smartphones, computers, and satellites, medical researcher Albert Furstenberg makes a compelling case that the influenza pandemic of 1917 and 18 was linked to the introduction of radar during World War I that lowered natural immunity. Medical sleuths have long puzzled why the misnamed Spanish flu first appeared among US soldiers in Kansas and among French and German soldiers on the Western Front, among whom one half to 3/4 were among the first to get sick from the influenza. Furstenberg, who first awakened to holistic health through the macrobiotic classic book Sugar Blues by Bill Dufty, observes a plant-based diet himself, but he contends that background electricity has had a bigger impact on the rise of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and other chronic ills than poor diet. His medical charts correlating the rise of these disorders with the introduction of radio, telephone, television, and other common electrical appliances are truly eye-opening. However, I feel that electric cooking, which the macrobiotic community has long recognized as an existential threat to health, may be the underlying factor for this correlation. But its impact is not discussed in the book. In a recent article entitled, "Is the Sky Falling?" Furstenberg links susceptibility to COVID-19 and electromagnetic fields in general, but not directly with 5G. Yes, he says there is a respiratory virus associated with influenza, but no, he continues, the virus does not cause the disease. Influenza is a neurological disease that can affect almost every organ, with or without respiratory symptoms. It is caused by electricity. A further tie-in with the bats is that satellites, cell phones, and other electronics affect their ability to fly, navigate, and hunt through echolocation. Climate change is also a contributing factor. It has shifted the bats' geographic range, migration, and hibernation cycles. Warmer temperatures can alter the frequency and pitch of their ability to echolocate and navigate. All right, so let's move from the cause and origin of corona to who gets the disease and who does not, an equally important question. A review of the data, such as this slide from Johns Hopkins, which is kind of the international clearinghouse for statistics on corona, suggests that people in northern advanced industrial countries, for the most part, are at much higher risk. Besides pollution, higher living standards, and more educational opportunities, what do these countries all have in common? The main factor they all have in common, according to World Health Organization, CDC, and other medical groups, is that 88% of all those who die from COVID have heart disease, cancer, diabetes, or other pre-existing condition. Their natural immune function is already suppressed, and they are highly susceptible to viral infection. Healthy adults and children, for the most part, remain largely immune. And what is the main factor in all of these pre-existing conditions? The modern diet, high in fat, animal protein, sugar, and ultra-processed food. Now this chart from the FAO, United Nations Organization, pretty much tells the story. The main determinant appears to be meat and other heavy animal food. Meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, and other animal products are classified as more contractive or youngizing and worsen COVID-19, as I mentioned, giving blood clots. Hence its faster spread in temperate northern climates. In contrast, sugar, excessive fruit, too much oil, coffee, alcohol, and other strong substances worsen Ebola, hence its emergence in southern tropical regions. It's interesting, if you look at the number one country here for eating meat, it's Luxembourg. And if we go back to that previous slide, you'll see that the country with the largest infection rate is Belgium. Belgium and Luxembourg are kind of sister countries, and their statistics are combined together. So it's very interesting that around the world, country with the highest meat consumption, that area also is now symptomatizing, has the highest rate of infection. It's very, very interesting. And if we go down, I had to cut off the chart here, but if you go down to the bottom and look at the per capita meat consumption in the countries where the coronavirus is much less, they're all the more semi-vegetarian countries of the world, mostly in East Asia or some Southern African countries. All right, so just as modern agriculture, along with deforestation, urbanization, and digitalization, are the underlying origin and cause of the crisis, the modern way of eating is the main factor in determining who gets sick and who doesn't. A plant-based whole foods diet naturally tends to protect against disease, both chronic, as in the case of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, and infectious, as in the case of corona, Ebola, and other contagious afflictions. Modern society's war against nature is the ultimate cause of the crisis. Just as farmers are misled into destroying weeds, insects, and other important parts of the natural ecosystem, physicians and healthcare givers, by and large, believe that bacteria and viruses must be exterminated. In fighting microbes, we are fighting ourselves. Each of us has trillions of bacteria and viruses living symbiotically in our bodies, on average 4 to 6 pounds per person. They make up a significant part of our DNA. This is a war that cannot be won, and one that should not have ever been fought. Out of ignorance and anger, many farmers and communities in China and elsewhere around the world have launched campaigns to eradicate bats because of their link to epidemic diseases. But as environmentalists note, this approach is misguided. Bats are one of the world's main pollinators. They disperse seeds, they eat insects and mosquitoes, preventing outbreaks of malaria and other deadly scourges. The new viral epidemics are largely caused by our war on nature and mounting arsenal of deadly chemicals, pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, and other toxins. It is not caused by random chance mutation. The novel viruses are Mother Nature's way of fighting back, the original bio defense. So I will conclude by just summarizing that in these challenging times, it is important to stay balanced and centered. Parents, teachers, workers, and children have come up with many original and creative responses to the crisis as it has unfolded. This fount of resilience and community solidarity augurs well for the future. And I like to think that this crisis is a dress rehearsal for unified planetary action to reduce global warming and climate change. Unfortunately, virtually no government, hospital, or parent-teachers association has yet issued basic common sense guidelines on strengthening natural immunity through diet and lifestyle. They're looking only toward vaccines. To prevent the next pandemic, organic, plant-based, dietary, agricultural, and environmental changes will need to be implemented. The creative energy released by Corona could lead further on the path to planetary health and sustainability but only if we self-reflect and make nature our friend and not our enemy. All right, so that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions or answers, or maybe Lynn and Connie have some comments. Yeah.
Okay, we're both muted. There we go. Wow, Alex, fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wow.
You know, as I look at this presentation, I was listening to Jeffrey Smith. He had a scientist, Zach, on the other day, and they were pointing this chemical connection between how the red blood cells are changing. And I think that connection between the bats and eating seeds and insects that have already been infiltrated by glyphosates, and I think that's a powerful discussion. You know, that's a powerful discussion.
Yeah, well, that's a link that has really not been made. Yeah.
No, you really linked it. It was very powerful. Connie, what do you have to say with Alex?
Well, there's so much. I was writing notes furiously as you were talking, and the whole idea of, well, there was so many, the 5G, the 4G, the 3G, the energetic connections that, have been broken or blocked, I found that very interesting. The whole, historical aspect of, the 1918 pandemic, and, where the people were, where the soldiers were when it happened. I mean, you've brought out so many correlations that really can't be disputed. I don't know where the solution comes from. That would be my question, I guess, to you, is if all of these indicators, point to, the problems, like, how do we undo that? Or how do we then, get to a solution-based formula?
Yeah, well, you've identified the number one question, and I think the name of your program offers a clue to the solution. Yeah. Namely, we start with ourselves and our home. Mm-hmm. That is the foundation of human culture and civilization throughout the ages, and that the spiral of health and harmony radiates out, from each of our individual homes. And so if we can, have a relatively peaceful, harmonious, and sustainable home, based on a balanced diet and lifestyle, and non-toxic building materials and everything else, and then we create neighborhoods and cities and so forth. So anyway, from the grassroots up, definitely lasting change will come. I also believe, in working at all other levels of society as well. So we work at a social level and a global, international level, and these kind of media events, because that will influence people to change their homes. But anyway, this kind of web that we're all creating, offers a positive, hopeful solution to all of the multiple crises we're now facing.
Yeah. Alex, when before Michio died, what did he say about the pandemic? You alluded to it, but I'm just curious how the links are coming over the years. I mean, we've seen a lot of ideas through Michio and Aveline, and you've written a lot with them, and I would love to just get some feedback on a little bit of the history and how, prediction-wise, we all saw him make these predictions, and then we've seen a lot of it come true, all the way through. And yeah, so if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, just briefly, I think one of Michio's greatest contributions was what he called the spiral of history, in which he looked at the whole panorama of human development, really from the beginning up to the present day, and showing that it moved, in this beautiful curving formation, but that it was all now coming to a head. In fact, he said that he predicted that, especially now with computers and digitalization, everything will be coming to a climax roughly in the mid 2030s. Which is 15 or 20 years from now. And, there are many indications of this. And he said that we have to, move in this more holistic, sustainable direction if we're to pass safely through this time, because the alternative is, quite frankly, the what he felt would be the kind of the end of natural human beings. It results in the emergence, and this is already happening, of some kind of bionic species or hybrid species. And this is already beginning to happen where people are fusing, digital implants literally into them in order to operate all of the many screens which they're using every day, and all to automate everything. Anyway, that's where the world is moving, toward an autonomous-based world, including human beings. And to reclaim our natural sovereignty, that's the issue. And we've got another 15 to 20 years to pass through this time. So it's extraordinarily challenging. But I personally am optimistic, and I think that, this green trend and revolution and the challenges that we're facing, like right now with Corona and everything else, is awakening us to, greater levels of cooperation, and that, we will pull through this. And it's just amazing to me how people responded to the Corona crisis, in the sense that, unfortunately, they didn't get the dietary or holistic foundation, so to speak, but in terms of wanting to help society, it brought out the best in society.
It did.
Medical and helping professions and everything else. It really brought out the best. I mean, and some people brought out the worst. They were, it seems to me, a much smaller group than the people who really stood up and helped their fellow human beings. So I think that kind of spirit will now hopefully carry over into all these other fields, and that, the ingenuity of particularly the young people today, that, they'll lead the way. I like to call, Greta Thunberg, who's the Swedish girl. I like to call her movement the New Children's Crusade.
Yeah, we talked yesterday about Earth Charter on our show in Pakistan. I've been working a lot with the agricultural community because GMOs are being infiltrated in Pakistan a lot. And so I spoke at the agricultural school in Pakistan. And I guess, if anything, Jeffrey Smith is one of the leading experts on GMOs now. And he spoke on our Earth Day show, where this show catapulted out of, actions of impact, taking action. And he really, like, when we were working on the GMOs, when you came to Ithaca and spoke at my house, and we were working on the whole GMO relationship, and then when Michu and Aveline came to Ithaca, I was just like so dedicated to this whole GMO. And then I kind of left it and studied theology, as you know. And this whole RNA, DNA changes that have happened now is really, really powerful, from what Jeffrey had said, and the plant kingdom changing so drastically from GMO seeds. And I'm just curious if you know anything about that, and the GMO changes that have happened because of people not going in a direction, positive direction.
Well, one related thing I can say, of course, I've been working on GMOs for 20 years, but I think just in the world of the ordinary world food supply, one of the most shocking things I saw was a study that was done by, I guess, you might say, a relatively conventional scientist, in which he showed that because of climate change and global warming, as you know, the plants and seeds have migrated, so that they've gone north or south or whatever the case may be. Anyway, the bottom line was that the nutrition of all of our edible crops have changed dramatically over the last 10 or 20 years. In other words, the amounts of sugar has increased, the amount of protein has decreased, the amount of vitamins, are off the charts in a negative way. And I mean, totally shocking. What it's technically called the iome, as opposed to the geome. Anyway, the iome is the mineral spectrum within any given plant. And the changes that have been taking place in such a short time. Ordinarily it takes thousands or millions of years to get the slightest change, in the course of nature's cycles. But human intervention now, by creating climate changed world, has done this just, in a matter of decades.
It's really a powerful thing. And I like the optimism. I have optimism too. I think, when I start looking at the young people, I'm thrilled about, we have amazing movement in the young people. And we've got 50,000 kids in Pakistan now, part of the Torch, which we're working on peace, health, environment, and technology. And we're building these teams and we're creating teams of change, right? So I have to be honest, I have so many questions about, Indus Valley and the old cultures. And I know you already know a lot, but I definitely am excited to work beside you and learn from you as my teacher at this time in our lives, because you're an amazing researcher and I just appreciate so much. But Indus Valley, do you have anything to share? Because we have a lot of friends from Pakistan. We have our farmer, they've donated 100 canals in Chitral, which is northern Pakistan. And we're starting a center there. And Shahzada is here and he wants to join, but there's not too much more time. But, anything for Indus Valley and Pakistan that you would recommend and how people could.
And writing on Indus Valley. It was one of what I call the ancient peaceful civilizations that lasted from, I think, was roughly 3,500 to 1700 BCE. And it was a large civilization based on the Indus Valley and the Saraswati River Valley. And for 2,000 to 3,000 years, they had a totally peaceful civilization. They had no armies. They had no defensive fortifications. They had no weaponry. Also, they had no temples. They had no central government. It was all voluntary associations. And they lived in total peace and harmony. And they had a plant-based diet. Barley was their main grain. They had a little bit of animal food, but it was, very modest, you might say condimental, as most indigenous societies did. And they left a script which remains undeciphered today. With our great computers, they have been unable to decipher it. Perhaps one of our listeners, one of your young friends in Pakistan, through their intuition, can decipher that. And maybe we'll learn a lot more about how they could create that kind of a, world, generation after generation, living in peace. There are very few, if any, cultures in the historical era over the 5,000 years that have done that.
Very powerful.
Very powerful.
Wow. Connie, go ahead. Ask anything.
Oh gosh, I have so many questions. We would love to have you back at some, if you have any time. My gosh, there's just so much to talk about. I just have to say, this is kind of off topic, but when I watched your YouTube on the cosmology and the spirals that you were talking about in your class, I mentioned that I did a thesis left, right brain hemisphere, and it kind of evolved into the spirals in the body and spirals in nature. And we have spirals on our fingers, and so it kept going through me, watching your YouTube on the energetic connection in nature and life in general in the universe. Anyway, I just wanted to say that out loud. I know it's
no, that's great. In fact, I'm just completing a book called Spiral of History. That I'd be happy to share.
I would love to
with your listeners, later this summer.
Okay, cool.
What is your current work? And then we'll let you go. But what is your current work? How can people get in touch with you? Alex does consultations, I know, Macrobiotic, but share a little bit on how people can get in touch. We've got planetaryhealth.com.
Yeah, that's one of our websites. Right now, we work out of Eastover, which is a holistic center here in the Berkshires. But because of the COVID, we've had to move our activities online. And our main activity is the Macrobiotic Summer Conference. And that will be from August 12th to 16th. And we have 15 wonderful speakers from around the world, including 6 cooking classes. So if anyone wants to join us, we'd be happy to have them join. You can check them out. There's a link on the Planetary Health site, or you can go directly to the macrobioticsummerconference.com website and register. That's our main summer event. Great.
Fantastic. And Macrobiotic Summer Camp, I've spent many, and, it's just so wonderful. And Bettina Dumbeck will be coming on next Saturday. She's going to come on our show next Saturday. So maybe you can tell people you're close together, you're working together, anything that you want to share with Bettina, because we'll invite people back next week for an amazing talk.
Anyway, Bettina and I work closely together all the time. Yeah, she's a fantastic teacher. She comes originally from Germany. She's lived in the United States now for 30 years. She was the senior cooking teacher at the Kushi Institute, and then she went on to create and found the Culinary Medicine School. And so we're working right now on a variety of medical projects and publishing projects. And anyway, she's fantastic. So I'm sure you'll all enjoy her.
Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you. I mean,
yes, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Namaste.
Yeah, we'll let you have the last words, Alex, because I think you can do this well. And then we'll close our show with your last words and your wisdom to society and to humanity. And we just appreciate so much every part of your work.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn and Connie, and may everyone have a wonderful summer and create a sustainable new green home.
All right.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Green Home. We're here every Saturday at 9 a.m. and appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Connie. Wow. Really lovely. Really lovely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we just want to continue to bring really quality people like Alex. And if you're interested in being on the show, Connie and I would love to have you. It's been really marvelous to have my roots of macrobiotics back. I've raised kids without antibiotics for 39 years, and I'm pretty thrilled about that. And, as a mom and watching the children, and I'm also a nurse, I've just seen so much in the medical way that needs to be changed. And so this inspiration of starting Green Home has been my specialty for years. I've been really dedicated to the environment. My first Green Home was 1984, before I met Michio and Aveline. And I just feel really excited about sharing that wisdom. And Connie, share what your help and we can do, many, many different things as far as consultations with your home, if you're interested.
Oh, yes. If any of you are interested, I do energy treatment work. I can do it, virtually. And if you have any questions about placement of, furniture in your home, for energy solutions in your home, for harmony in your home and your life, yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
And you can find all our shows in this link going by ecoinspiredliving.com. Connie and I have our shows posted there. So if you're interested in seeing other shows that were here, all proceeds go towards nonprofits and supporting the show. We're also having sponsors support the show. So we would love your support. And we appreciate everything, every one of you joining us, because green home is where it starts, as Alex just said. It's really, our homes are sacred and our hearts are sacred. And if we can create that inner witness, that inner wisdom, that inner relationship to ourselves, it's really important. So last words.
Thank you for your consciousness. Thank you all for your consciousness in, joining us on the show and spreading the word. Okay. Have a great week.
Take care. Blessings.